A very good morning to you wherever you're catching us from. Welcome to Morning Express. My name is Trix Ingado.
And I'm Jesse Rogers. A good morning to you. It's quite early, 6 a.m. and you're right on time. This is Morning Express. Of course, we take a look at the latest developments. It's been a busy weekend in terms of political rhetoric. Resign, I will not resign. What does this portend for the country? 17 months to the general election.
Absolutely. And of course, all that is encapsulated in the press. And we shall be taking a look at what is being headlined by the local papers and the international papers. And this is going to be interesting to see what they're prioritizing. There's a lot about politics, as Jesse has said, but at the same time, the exchequer is digging deeper into your pockets. This is what the Standard is telling us. So stay tuned for that and much more. But later on, we shall be telling you about the press, where on Monday we like to be a bit introspective and find out where citizen journalism lies in the general landscape of journalism. So stay tuned for that and much, much more.
And just as you hinted earlier, it's definitely, you'll be forced to dig deeper into your pockets. Pain at the pump, even as the Energy, Petroleum and Regulatory Authority has reviewed the prices upwards. Petrol goes up by 8 shillings. What does this mean? Bearing in mind inflation is centered on the cost of fuel and the cost of food. So we'll definitely delve deeper into this and much more. So once again, welcome to the show. We can't wait to kickstart it in style. So why not start with the international?
Absolutely. Before getting into all that, let's take a look at what's making headlines in the region and further afield. And we're starting off with the Daily Monitor. And the Daily Monitor is telling us about a poll petition, the hurdles of Bobby's way. Now, Bobby Wine, of course, we've seen in the headlines how he has struggled to get what he feels is his right as a candidate who was trying to get himself at the helm of the leadership of Uganda. And when the Supreme Court reconvened on Thursday morning for a pre-trial session of a petition in which former presidential candidate Robert Kyanguly, that is Bobby Wine, is challenging President Museveni's recent victory, Kyanguly's lawyers had a quick, honest confession: they were not ready. So take a look at that and see how it is unfolding in the Pearl of Africa. And in Tanzania, we're told Tanzania High Court stresses Nigerian drug trafficker, sentences a Nigerian drug trafficker to life. Far from that, we're told about the wonders of 32 million Songwe project. Retired Tanzanian High Court judge as well, Regina Rueyemamu, has passed on. Take a look at that. They're also giving us a tally of COVID-19 infections, and of course Kenya is leading with 102,867. Tanzania is still at 509 according to this tally. Uganda is at 40,019, while Rwanda is at 17,343, all the while as they tighten their belt in terms of digging deeper into making sure this does not spread. Now let's take a look at Rwanda. Speaking of vaccine apartheid, among hurdles Ngozi faces at WTO, and Ngozi is the new head of WTO. Take a look at that and find out what's being spoken about when it comes to this, because it is alleged that richer countries, the more white race-dominated countries, are being prioritized in terms of the vaccine against COVID-19. So see what more you can learn about that. And on the Rwanda Today also, we learned that Rwanda lifts a duty on luxury cars in move to woo tourists, and COVID vaccine maker AstraZeneca doubles 2020 profit. Then the East African right here is telling us about EU. Rusesabagina arrest and forced disappearance. Now, Rusesabagina is a man who has been at the center of a controversy in Rwanda. Some see him as a hero, while others see him as a perpetrator. Take a look at his latest problems as he was arrested when he came back for questioning to Rwanda. And of course, that story on vaccine apartheid still making headlines in the East African. Then we have the CNN on their world news page. We're told when the Dalai Lama dies, his reincarnation will be a religious crisis. Here's what could happen. Then we're told about what's happening in Europe. The EU is facing the most serious crisis in its history. Many are wondering if anyone really is in charge. Then Saudi women's rights activist Lujian Al-Haltul released from prison, while Nigerian police arrest protesters at Lekki shooting site. And that is what the CNN has on their World News page. Take a look at that and learn more about what's making headlines internationally. But let's take a look at what's making headlines locally, and we shall be looking at the Standard this morning. As you can see on the front page, 2022 mad rush for new parties and the pain as Treasury raises taxes yet again. This is something that you have to look forward to. And joining me for this conversation, Arthur Odera is a former Teso North Member of Parliament. Alex Manyasi is a governance and policy expert who's joining us via Zoom, while Peter Namolindo is an aspiring Member of Parliament, Matungu constituency belonging to the ANC party. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. All right. Now we shall be discussing the mad rush for new parties later on, and of course the return of Mohisa Kitui. We had a very in-depth interview here on KTN News last evening, so we can dig deeper into that. And he has declared that obviously he is in the race. But let's take a look at the general stories here. 2022 mad rush for new parties. Election fever is what it's being termed, with only 17 months to the next poll. A record 1,000 party names have been reserved at the Registrar of Political Parties as individuals prepare to reap the demand of nomination certificates. More details on page 4. I'll start with you, Honorable Odera. What do you make of this one?
Well, it is indeed a mad rush. I mean, in a country such as Kenya, with a lot of parties already, to think that there is 1,000 different parties seeking registration. Ultimately, that's the purpose of reserving a name, that you're going to seek registration for a party, could mean a number of different things. One, that there are people who are willing to register parties and use them as a vehicle for income generation. We've seen that in the past. There are people who sell parties after registration. There are people who, for pay, give nomination certificates to willing candidates who may not find a nomination in other parties, or who may, for whatever reason, miss the train in other parties. Yeah. It could also mean that there is enough space for political mobilization in Kenya, based on different ethnic groups, based on different political philosophies. It means that people are seeing the opportunity that political parties present. However, in terms of philosophy, it is not possible that all their 1,000 parties have different philosophies that are significantly different from each other. Yeah. That really means that the opportunity may be more economic than philosophical or political. Okay,
Honorable Namolindo, 1,000 party names, isn't that a bit too much?
Of course, it is too much. It shows that the election fever is coming, and in Kenya, political parties is a big business. Yes. Because as we go towards the election, the general election, many people know that candidates will seek for the certificate to vie, and they'll pay money. So it's a big business in Kenya to have a political party. Right. You either get money from the candidate or you sell the party to get money. But it also shows as Kenyans, what do parties stand for? Yeah. Do these parties actually have objectives, or do they have a clear manifesto of what they want to achieve in this country, or is it just a vehicle for someone to get to parliament or to the county assembly? So it is not a healthy political situation in Kenya to have that kind of rush to register political parties. Okay,
so if you were to weigh between the two, economic desperation and perhaps just a liberal democratic space, which do you think is more and in influencing this clamor for ahead of 2022?
It's a more liberal democratic space. Really? Kenyans feel they can do anything with their political space, and therefore they don't want to be confined to the older big political parties. Right. They want to have a choice. They want to choose any party so that they can be able to vie and reach the ballot. Yes. As you know, very many political parties actually lock out very many potential candidates.
Indeed.
For various reasons. Maybe because the party doesn't like that particular candidate. So the candidates want to have a space whereby they can choose to go to the ballot using any party that is available.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, Honorable Odera, let's take a look at page 6 of the Standard this morning. We're told about a story. This is a big one that has made headlines since yesterday, and it has even roped in the media. If you have been following this story on social media, some people have been, well, led by the Deputy President, have actually been subscribing to certain news outlets while others unsubscribing. Now, when you see this, this all happened after Ruto was heckled in Isiolo as leaders snubbed an event. According to this article, the Deputy President Ruto was attending a fundraising event at a church in Isiolo. At the church fundraiser event in Kiwanja in Ngaremara Ward, that is 6 kilometers from Isiolo town, the only local elected leader present was Isiolo women rep, and that is Rehema Jadesa. Ruto's visit looked like a poisoned chalice. This is what the article said. And from the start, as the tension was palpable, from as early as 11 a.m. Ruto then arrived at 3:30 a.m. and of course the drama ensued and spilled over into social media and eventually, you know, mainstream media. Honorable Odero, what do you make of this one?
I mean, this is a great example of politics beginning to hurt business.
Yes.
And whether or not business on its part takes sides in politics is a big question. And it's a question that deserves a lot of examination in our economy. You go back to 2007 and 2013, 2017, the ODM party at some point or other advocated for its supporters to boycott certain businesses. I remember they boycotted Brookside, they boycotted Nation Media, and several other entities that were seen to be either leaning or for some reason apologizing for the Jubilee side, and before that for the PNU side. Now, this is a toxic environment.
Very.
This is a great example of what needs to be nipped in the bud. It is an example where our politics is not just politics for the purpose of electing leaders and taking power. It becomes politics that actually undermines business. And I think that business also needs to examine itself.
Yes.
It needs to do a lot of introspection. Are we actually neutral arbiters in this process? Are we neutral players? Are we creating an enabling environment where every deserving candidate gets their space and let the best leaders be elected?
But Honorable Odera, just sorry to interrupt, but do we have to be neutral?
And if you don't choose to be neutral, then you must face the risk of politicians not being neutral when dealing with you as well. So there's a risk to it.
Yes.
If you choose to be neutral, then you must accept that the politicians will also come for you. And remember, I mean, we have a recent example in the US. I mean, take two examples take CNN on one side, take Fox News on the other side. Fox News is an apologetically Trumpian conservative.
Yes.
CNN on the other side is an apologetically democratic-leaning and pro-Biden then, because Biden was the Democratic candidate. Now, those guys set themselves up in such a way that they accept the risk that comes with their candidate not making it.
Indeed.
And they also accept the glory that comes with their candidate making it. And I think we have a young economy. We have an economy that's already battered by COVID and other economic factors that came before COVID. We have an economy that is fragile. We know that for a fact. A few weeks of violence in 2008 set us back many trillions of shillings.
Yes.
And the economic suffering that came with that took us years to recover from. COVID and the events that happened before COVID will take us years to recover from. Now, you don't want an environment where political undermining of business becomes endemic. Because you see, again, the thing about politics is politics has a lot of passion. People react emotively to when they feel that their political candidate is not being treated fairly. And therefore, it's not a logical process for people to react negatively to business. And I think that this requires a lot of attention. The round table business meeting that are usually held by leaders across the country, business itself in their caucuses need to examine, if you choose to be biased, accept that you will be hit by the side that doesn't like you.
Okay.
And people will recognize that very quickly, that you're not being neutral. And I think probably my view is that if business in a fragile economy, in a young economy such as ours, probably the best way is to be neutral.
Okay. Now, Honorable Nabulindo, you are a politician, you're vying for office, right? Of course, you do understand there are people, there are areas where you get support and there are areas where not so much. It is natural. What do you make of the DP's reaction to what happened in Isiolo?
It's interesting because it is now, politics has now hit the BBI proper.
Yes.
And it was coming. It is something that it was just a matter of time, and it is now here.
Yeah.
And all over the country, when these leaders will be moving around, people will be reacting to the BBI as to what the leader subscribes to. As the case of Isiolo, whether it was stage managed or whether it was natural reaction from the people, but it sends a message that we are pro-BBI.
Yes, or against.
Or against BBI. It is a message that is being sent by the people when they see a leader who subscribes to a certain view on the BBI. Recognize that BBI is the new kid on the block in terms of politics. And it's going to recur around the country, because as the county assemblies go on a mission to pass or reject, people will react, and they will react when politicians speak about it everywhere around the country. So actually what happened in Isiolo, it's not anything that was not to happen. It was to happen, and it will happen in so many other counties as we progress.
Okay. Now, I like your reaction to another story, also linked to the Deputy President, but this is a story or an article that's coming from sentiments from, well, Raila Odinga, former Premier. Yes. Now, he has said here, DP is disloyal and unfit to lead Kenya. What do you make of that? Of course, this is just one of the many comments that have been flying about between those two. Yes,
the two heavyweights are now heading to the ring. For the top seat on the country. So we expect each of them to criticize one another in that particular manner. The former Prime Minister has a certain opinion about the Deputy President, yes, and the Deputy President has certain opinions about the former Prime Minister. Right. It's all about politics. You try to portray the other candidate as not deserving, and the other candidate will portray you as not deserving. Right. It's all about politics. So we expect more of that in the near future as we move towards the general election. We shall see each of them criticizing each other very strongly, and even trying to influence the views of the potential voters around the country. Right. And now there's, on page 8, there is a title that's going to tug on your heartstrings because of the way it has been framed this morning. State raids your pocket to fund bigger budget. And this, of course, has to do with more taxation that is expected. Treasury is betting on reversal of COVID-19 relief measures and new taxes to milk more cash out of a bleeding economy. Revised spending numbers. We've told that we're at 30.01 trillion shillings. Treasury's enhanced budget for the 2021-2022 financial year. There's more. We're told 1.78 trillion shillings is the cash the taxman is expected to mobilize in taxes in the 12th month of June next year, in the 12 months to June next year. Then we have 1.2 billion, the increase in the government's tax collection target for the new financial year, and 1,000 is the number of new businesses targeted by the KRA for digital service tax. Then 976.1 billion estimated budget deficit, which is the difference between expenditure and tax revenues in the 2021-2022 financial year. Last but not least, we have 11 billion increase in recurrent expenditure, which includes spending on wages,
payment of interest, pensions and other administrative costs. And the CS here is quoted having said, going forward, we expect revenue collection in the financial year 2021-2022 to spring back, buoyed by the improving economic environment, tax policy and revenue administration measures that we have put in place. Honorable Odera, do you have faith that the economy can actually hold up these numbers and help us not feel the pinch?
I think we will feel the pinch. And because let's try to explain to ourselves why there is a pinch in the first place, and why there is likely to be increase in taxes. And in doing that, we need to shine our torch in the right places. The first place we should shine our torch in is the debt. The huge debt burden that is hanging around the neck of Kenyans like a yoke that cannot be carried any further. It is a yoke that we have given unto ourselves over time. It has crept upon Kenyans since 2013 because the increase in debt has been phenomenal under the Jubilee government. And as a result of the increase in debt, some of which is ridiculously expensive. You know, foreign debt is generally worldwide, generally pegged around 3% per annum interest and so on. We have borrowings in Kenya that are borrowed at 8.7% and more, which is ridiculously expensive. And that interest alone makes the debt much bigger than it should be and makes the repayments much bigger than they should be. And that is one of the things we need to shine our torch on. And how we deal with that, whether we need to renegotiate the debt. China gave us a window, and I think we should grab that window with both arms. International lenders might be able to buy that debt from us, from the expensive debt to cheaper debt, so that we reduce the burden on Kenyans. Of course, you know, the slump in revenue collection because of COVID and related factors has been a reality, and we are all hoping that as the economy reopens, as the effects of COVID begin to go away, we will see more increased revenue collection, which will enable the government to pay in time county governments. We know how much businesses have suffered because of delayed payments by both national government and county governments. And you know, of course, that county governments are reliant on national governments to receive exchequer and therefore to make the payments they need to the businessmen that give them services. And we are likely to feel the pain. And I think that in fairness, we are not alone. Across the world, there has been pain of one type or another resulting from the effects of COVID, mainly in our case resulting from the economic problems we've had even before COVID.
Honorable Nabulindo, what do you make of this one, the pain that is being promised, and do you have faith in the economic recovery that would perhaps make it easier for Kenyans?
Thank you. Yeah, of course, it's going to be painful for Kenyans. Any higher tax for Kenyans is painful, but the government has no options. If the economy has to recover, then definitely Kenyans have to be taxed highly. So it's a delicate balance between protecting Kenyans and reviving the economy. If the economy has to be revived, then Kenyans have to be highly taxed. And when Kenyans are highly taxed, of course, it's very painful. Kenyans have a lot of problems. COVID brought around loss of jobs, loss of the household incomes. And here, again, you are being taxed highly. So it's going to be very painful for Kenyans in the near future. But I can understand what the government wants to do. The government wants to get some revenue from Kenyans so that the economy can stabilize and maybe for the good of Kenyans in future. But Kenyans will not be happy, and many Kenyans actually were not anticipating this kind of
this kind of thing.
This kind of thing.
Especially given this is the second time that this is happening.
Because after COVID, many Kenyans were expecting relief. But instead of relief, we are now being taxed highly.
Okay.
Obviously, it's going to be painful.
Okay. Now, we would like to get to bring into the conversation Alex Manyasi, who's a governance and policy expert, who's joining us via Zoom. Welcome to the show, Mr. Manyasi. Now, we're taking a look at the Standard. On the front page, you told about pain as Treasury raises taxes yet again. It says raiding Kenyans' pockets. Oil prices rose by up to 8 shillings a litre yesterday as government plans to raise more revenue to fund an ambitious spending plan, and it became clear in an economy the authorities acknowledge is not out of the woods yet. What do you make of this, as given that the CS is expressing optimism that the economy shall be buoyed by this situation shall be buoyed by the improving economic environment, tax policy and revenue administration measures that have been put in place?
Yeah, thank you, Trix. And I want to say good morning to all Kenyans. It's a bit interesting that we're having discussion around raising of tax and improving of the economy, while at the same time we are talking about the issues of debt. But as we speak about all these things, we have not yet, as a country, resolved the issue of corruption and wastage of taxpayers' money. So if you combine these two things, then probably there are certain things that you start thinking about. First of all, anytime you raise the cost of fuel, and I want to repeat that, anytime you raise the cost of fuel, you technically are raising the cost of everything. So what the government is doing is to make sure that the cost of living is going to go up, inflation rates are going to go up, basic commodities are going to go up, and therefore, by extension, if you look at the other side of the coin, which is the fact that COVID has been around, and therefore people's income has diminished, some people have lost jobs, some people have lost income, most businesses either downsized or closed. And so if you look at it like that, then when you raise the cost of living with diminished spending power, then I do not know how that revenue is supposed to be raised. What will happen is that a few people will be taxed very highly. A few people will be able to purchase goods and services, but majority of Kenyans will be living below their capacity. And therefore, the anticipated revenue that the government wants to raise might not necessarily be seen at the end of the tunnel. So that is the situation I see. And unfortunately, we have already run into the campaign mode. So the expenditures of government will obviously be skewed towards certain directions that are not that are not capital related. And therefore, what you'll expect is that we'll have shrinking jobs instead.
Right. Very interesting there. Take a look at the paper and see what it has to say. As usual, the press covers the good, the bad, and the ugly, and page 12 and 13 contain the bad and the ugly, it seems, this day. And let's start off with this one. On more girls go missing as cases of trafficking rise. Parents narrate the nightmare of trying to trace their children who vanished from right under their watch. And we're given the numbers here. Contributing factors include, of course, to the disappearances. They include child trafficking and non-family abductions, custody-related issues, being lured online for sex, separated and wandered off from family, runaways, abandoned, truancies, special needs and coercion. And there's a big question mark right there. 190 is the number of children who disappeared without a trace only last year. And these are the ones that have made it to the front pages. Who knows how many more there are that have not been reported, because the paper usually is just the tip of the iceberg. Honorable Odera, what do you make of this?
I think there's a failure in the system that, first of all, the morality system, where there are things that, in a normal society, there is a heavy respect and charitable treatment of children and women generally. And even in terms of war, there are rules that govern many communities that go to war about touching children and touching women. So we have broken down our morality so much that now children are being trafficked for not just labor, but also sex and not just sex, but also drugs and many other things. I think that there is an industry that's developing in our economy and many other places where the young people become targets of the drug lords. You introduce them to drugs while they are still young. They get hooked when they are still young, and then you own them throughout their lives. So they end up in their adulthood fighting in and out of rehab, trying to find a way to win themselves off the drugs, but you capture them while young. And we saw an example last year in Nairobi where there was somebody who took children. Children disappeared from their homes, and they were found in a house somewhere, having been introduced to sex and drugs. And you must ask yourself, is there a huge economic gain to the people who are doing these things? And the answer is yes. There is a whole chain of participants in that chain where children are, those who take the children, those who are able to steal children from wherever they steal them from, they manage their sector. They deliver those children to a certain destination and earn their keep. And those guys now induct those children towards an industry, and they earn their keep. And then there is the industry of the drug peddlers themselves, the drug barons, who now have a ready market in those children who've been inducted into the drugs world, and then they can consume drugs for the rest of their life. So you find that in the underground, that economy is developing. And I am sure that our policing system knows about it. They know the players. Is it about the money that is in that industry that's able to penetrate our police system? What is it that we are not doing as an economy to be able to nip this thing in the bud?
Protect our children. It is a worrying trend, as the article says. Missing child Kenya data shows girls are more likely to get lost than boys. Honorable Nabulindo, what do you make of this?
It's very, very unfortunate in our society to see such kinds of acts happening, that we are not able to protect our own children. It's an unfortunate situation. It seems the social fabric has broken down or has disintegrated. It seems nobody is actually keen on taking responsibility about taking care of children, especially the girl child. And people are taking advantage of the broken social fabric together with poverty to exploit this vulnerable group of people in the society. And actually, it is time the government should take up very serious action against these individuals who perpetrate these acts. And actually, the reason why maybe it goes on, because there is a market internationally that encourages this kind of action. So there is need maybe to form stringent laws that will curb this kind of trade around the world, not only in Kenya, but around the world, because most of these children are taken out of the country to be used for certain purposes that is not healthy for the society.
Absolutely.
And we know all about it. And therefore,
perhaps calling for collaboration with other governments?
Yes. We need collaboration with other governments, the way they have tackled the issue of drugs and other crimes, international crimes. So this issue of trafficking of girls for various reasons, whether it's employment, whether it's sex exploitation, it needs intervention by all the international governments so that we protect this vulnerable group. And in Kenya, it is so unfortunate because it has gone on for long, and it seems the government is unable to stop it. And it raises questions why the government is unable to stop it, and it goes on under our own watch. Yes.
Right. And the stories that are attached to this article are very, very emotive. And I mean, the last time Melvin Owor, a 16-year-old, was seen around their home in Nairobi, Soweto, she appeared to be taking a casual stroll. Her 2-month baby was asleep and in their single-roomed house. Now, just imagine, that is a 16-year-old already with a baby. Now, we're told nobody thought anything was off until her baby woke up crying, but there was nobody to pick him up. Melvin was nowhere to be seen. When they called her number, it was off, and that was January 23rd this year. and that is the day Ouma says their lives changed completely. Mr. Manyasi, what do you make of this? Is it a policy issue? Is it how we are handling crime? Why is this turning into a trend?
Yeah, so I can respond to that in several ways. Number one is what I call the push factors. The push factors, in my view, could be economic factors, things that would make someone vulnerable because of the fact that they are easily lured into things that they will otherwise, if they had something meaningful to do, they wouldn't get into. That's one. And then number two, what my panelists have already mentioned, which is the social fabric. Because people are not talking to each other anymore, aunties and uncles and grandparents who used to guide children are not there anymore to guide them. And if they're there, probably children are not guidable anymore. And then lastly is the aspect of just the fact that a 16-year-old has a child, for example, tells you that we have a serious problem in the sense that we are not, because this is an underage. This child is underage, and therefore, by extension, you should not be expecting that she's having a baby, but she should be in school somewhere, pursuing her education and her dreams. And therefore, what you see is that the perpetuity of poverty is such that if a 16-year-old has a child, the possibility of her growing up poor are very high, and therefore the possibility of her bringing up a child who will also grow up poor is also almost inevitable. So that is the cycle that we deal with. But on the other hand, we have other factors which are outside of this scope, which are security related, for example. Then some of the basic questions we'll be asking ourselves are, number one, if the security agencies are not able to cut the ring that is running this, then obviously that in itself encourages more of this happening. For instance, if someone was to make money out of someone and get away with it, and make more money from someone else and get away with it, then the possibility of them continuing with that trade is much higher than if they made money from one person and they were arrested and that cartel dismantled. Then the possibility of them making more money and other people falling into the same trap is much lower. So those are the combination of things that we have to look at when it comes to such things. To make it worse, you will hear that most of these cases actually will be around Nairobi. The reason why around Nairobi is that the design of the way Nairobi works, especially in the informal settlements, if it's an adult, for example, them accessing criminal rings and gangs, them accessing drugs, them accessing information that will be misleading is much, much higher. And a child disappearing in the Nairobi informal settlements is also much higher, because if you are in my rural home, for example, and you passed somewhere as a stranger with a child who is connected to me, then people are likely to question where that child is going with that person. But in Nairobi, nobody, apart from your immediate neighbor, I mean, who cares? And everybody moves around their business as if everybody else does not exist. So that's the complexity with which we live in.
All right. Thank you very much, Alex Manyasi. And a positive note actually from this one is that for those who have missing children, there's actually a government site, www.cwsk.go.ke, where the government posts images of found unclaimed children. So if you're looking for a missing child, perhaps go to this website and see if you can find your kin. And of course, like I said, the bad and the ugly are on page 12 and 13. Woman in fear as husband held for defiling daughter. Then we have wife chops off man's ear for leasing land. Then we have another one, sex abuse cases hit church-run boys' school. Take a look at the paper, learn more about what's happening in your country, from politics, the economy, and of course our society. And when you take a look at the pull-out this day, we're told it's all about cancer, and very inspirational stories here about people who have beaten cancer. And you can learn more about about how they did it, their experiences, and perhaps get some hope if you're affected or have it yourself. Now, coming up on the other side is The Way It Is, where we'll be taking a look at the latest in politics. JC Rogers, I'll be continuing on with our guests and digging deeper into the issues that are at hand as far as Kenyan politics is concerned. But for now, let's take a break.